There you go, guys. So let's see some of your ideas on this first exercise. Let's do this. So the first question was, what is the function of the opening sentence? So if we think about that very first sentence, opening sentence, also called as topic sentence, um, what would you say is the function of it? What can you say about that sentence specifically?
So, teacher, the function of the opening sentence is contextualize readers that India has a significant number of cities with a rapid transformation and growth in terms of population and in terms
Excellent,
of population.
excellent, Nicholas. I think the key word you mentioned there is contextualize. So that's one of, in general terms, not talking about just this opening sentence, but in general terms, opening sentences expect to do that, to give context to the reader. That's one thing. Also, as Nicolas said, as you are presenting a specific information and you're telling, for instance, India is the country with the greatest number of cities in a state of rapid transformation. If you're saying this, you're also introducing the topic. So you're giving context, you are introducing the topic. And on the other hand, you also want, let's say, to convince your audience to read the text. So it's like you have to read this. You see, that's part of a message that you need to send there. So you gotta give context. Then you have to introduce the topic and also to catch the reader's attention. We could say that in general terms, that's the function of an opening sentence. That's it. So you just by reading the very first sentence, you should know what the rest of the text is about. You see, you are presenting the topic, as Nicolas said, you're giving context and you're introducing the whole thing. There you go. Now, what is the purpose of each paragraph? Guys, what would you say in this case would be the purpose of each one of the paragraphs? What do we have over there?
I think that the first paragraph is to give us an introduction to the discuss of the lecture. The second one, it's about the real information of the graphs and information about the growing up of the population in India. And the second one is a contrast, or it's a contrast by the second paragraph and the last paragraph, giving us an example of the more or the highest cities in terms of growing, and the one that is not as growing as much as the others.
Thank you very much indeed, Diego. So basically here the summary, but what Diego has shared with us shows the importance of assigning, like purposes, as they say here, to each one of the paragraphs. So it's not an arbitrary, let's say, division of the text, like we divide the text in chunks just because it looks better, and that's it. But we could say that on the one hand, dividing the text in paragraphs has got the intention of yes, of portioning the text so it is easier to read. That's one thing that happens, because if you think about any text, like just see one page of a report of any page of a text, and if you see one single block of text, it feels harder to read, right? So we know that. So when we see different paragraphs, it feels a little bit easier because the information or everything you're presenting is divided into different sections. So that is something that happens. But apart from that, as Diego says, you would have one specific purpose with each one of them. So in the very first paragraph, you are effectively, presenting the context, and it's somehow a way to expand the information, which is in the very first sentence. And we could even say that in the first paragraph, in one page, for example, in the first paragraph, you would somehow anticipate what you're gonna describe in the rest of the text. You see? So once again, it's some sort of an introduction, but then you would develop a specific information in each one of the paragraphs. So you can do what Diego did, which was to actually say, okay, this paragraph is about this. You see, instead of perhaps mixing lots and lots of topics, which would make it way harder for you to understand more clearly what is the purpose of each one of the paragraphs. So guys, if we've got to underline, which is this step number 3, underline the information in the text which is taken directly from the graphs. Well, give me just one example, guys, of information which is has been taken directly from the graphs, guys. Just one example, which is very easy in this case. What kind of information do we have which is directly extracted from?
Well, we can
the-
say this one that is grew by an incredible 55% between the 91 and this one.
Yeah, so they say, according to Baba, Surat a city in Gujarat. Okay, so Surat grew by an incredible 55% between 1991 and 2001, right? So in this case, we said Surat, so that's the blue. So we've got that information over here, right? So that's something which is somehow directly taken from there. In this case would be this, right? The second graph. So yeah, this is a very obvious example of information which is taken directly from the text, from the graph, I'm sorry. Right, so that is an example. And we've got more examples, mostly, well, those which are interpretations of the graphs, right? So it's like based on what the graphs show, you basically put that in words and you use percentages of numbers and in general, so you can describe that. I think that this is very easy, but taking into account the fourth question, what type of additional information does the text include? What information did you guys find which is not in the graphs? What information is
The
not there?
contrast,
This one, the last one? Which part exactly? I can see it there. So there is a piece of information which is not, let me see. Okay, so something which is not in the graphs, for example, is the fact that Mumbai is India's largest city, for example. In this case, this is not something we can infer based on the graph. This is something which is not there, right? This is not in the graph, but that helps us a lot to have more context, you see. So they are providing here an information which is not in the graph, but which might be very useful for us to give context to the rest of the text, you see. So that's basically it, guys. Taking into account here the graphs, well, we know that basically you can read the graphs in so many different ways. That perhaps is not a big deal. The point here is the organization of the text itself, which is what we just said. This is extremely important. So if you are writing a report, which is the case here, if we are writing a brief report, we need to think about these steps, guys. Somehow, actually, the steps number 1 and 2 are essential, you see. But in general terms, if we are going to write a report based on graphs, if the exercise is data specific, we should think of these 4 steps necessarily. First of all, what is going to be, what do we want to say with the opening sentence or topic sentence? What is that thing that we want to say? Because when you identify that, it means that you know exactly what you're going to be developing throughout the whole text. The second one, based on what we stated in the opening sentence, how are we going to organize that in each one of the paragraphs, right? Then the third step is, okay, exactly what information are we going to take directly from the graph? Because you could extract lots of different things and analyze that information in different ways, right? But you decide that based on what you said on the opening sentence at the end, because that information has to somehow inform that idea in the opening sentence. And last but not least, also decide what kind of additional information, which is not there, you plan to include. That's essentially how it goes. Talking about the international exams, this is something that you may see a lot. Like you might perhaps, in the case of the writing assignment, chances are that you may perhaps have to compose a short text base on a graph. So I really, guys, recommend you have a look at this, because I mean, apart from, you know, having to do this in an international exam, we may do it this semester as well. Who knows, right? Okay, guys, so I'd like to know if you have any comment or question or doubt about this before we jump to the next part. No questions whatsoever? Okay, guys, so we're getting closer to a task that has to do precisely with this, but we need a preparation for that. So before that, guys, we're gonna have a look at this language for writing a box we've got here. So basically here, this is all about vocabulary. This is about language, precisely, right? So we're gonna see some expressions that you can use for different functions that we may need in a case like this. So for instance, the very first section or a function, I'm sorry, has to do with giving the source of information. So those are expressions that we can use to give source of information. So for instance, a recent study showed that, and then you continue. So that would be a way to start your opening sentence. In a report published this week, you see, that's another way to do it. The second function is describing the subject under consideration. So basically, that's about describing what you are going to be talking about during the text. So the top city, as far as growth is concerned, right? That's a way to say it. Then we've got another function, which I believe it's really important, which is describing change and pace. So when you want to describe how something has changed, and then pace, I don't know if you guys remember exactly what pace is. This is a word that I use a lot, so I believe you should know that. Pace, guys. Don't you guys know what pace is?
Based or pace?
Pace, pace, just like the way it is here, pace. Just look at this, pace over here, pace. What is that? Okay, perhaps you guys don't know. So pace has to do with somehow with rhythm as well. So that has to do with the speed at something that something is taking. So for instance, if you say that the cities are growing at a very high pace or a very fast pace, it means that the rhythm at which they are growing is fast. Basically, that has to do with the speed somehow at which something happens. If you say, for instance, you're talking to somebody and to a group of people, and you say, okay, you all must follow my pace as I work. It means that you're telling the others that they have to do things the way you do them in terms of a speed. So if you do something fast, they gotta do it fast. If you do something slow, they gotta do it slow. That's basically what they say. So, and then if we are talking about change and pace, we've got three options, right? We can talk about something which is increasing, and that's why we've got this arrow here. So we've got these verbs and expressions: increased, went up, rose, soared, doubled, traveled at a higher rate. So for instance, something very obvious, like the number of people who are going out on weekends has increased in the last 2 months. So that means that more people are going out. The number of people who go out just went up, for instance, went up, which means that it increased. And same thing happens with most of those expressions. The number of people who goes out for dinner has doubled since the pandemic started, for example. So that's to talk about how something has increased, right? But we also have expressions like stabilize, level off, or bottom out, you see, which are expressions that we use when we want to say that something has been stable, that something hasn't changed. So I don't know if you say the price the price of home appliances has leveled off during the last 3 weeks. So that means that you're saying that the price has been pretty much the same during the last weeks, for example. And then of course we've got expressions that we use to say exactly the opposite, which is to say that something has, you know, decreased basically. So we have half, decrease, dipped, fell, dropped, plummet, has dropped by nearly a third, more than 20% at a lower rate. So that we get several options here to say that something has decreased, right? We also have some expressions here which are more neutral, I would say. Slightly, you might remember that expression from previous lessons, which we use these expressions to say that something has changed, perhaps, but very slowly and very little. So it's almost a neutral expression. So if you say, for instance, the attitude of people has slightly changed, it means that the change has been very, very little. So it's not stable, it hasn't decreased or it has increased, but it's been pretty much the same. Gradually also means that, right? So the number of people who attend to class has gradually increased. It means that it has increased, but very slowly. Same thing happens with sharply, which it means very little, and dramatically and rapidly are completely different. It means that this is something we use to describe changes which are very obvious and very big. And then we have also functions for describing time periods between 2005, 2008, from 2000, 2020, by the year 2015. You see, so we've got different expressions also in the text we use for time periods and for connecting information, comparing to. So what you guys have to do, and this is something we're gonna do individually, we are going to find other expressions that match this function. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what you gotta do, guys, is just to have a look at the text and look for other expressions that you can put here, which also reflect those functions. In other words, it's just other expressions for these same functions, okay? So I'll give you around 4 to 5 minutes, guys, to do this. We're gonna do it individually. And then we're gonna just double check here. So let's do that, guys. Okay, guys, so let's see really quick those expressions we can include here. So what would be the expression that we can include for the function number 1, which is giving the source of information?
According to
There you
something.
go. Thank you very much. According to, that would be an expression that we can also use for that same function. Number 2, guys, describing the subject under consideration. Did you guys know? I'm gonna help you with that one, if you will. So you can say in terms of, right? This is something I say a lot. Sometimes it's like in terms of growth, in terms of population, in terms of whatever. And when you use this expression, that means that you're gonna be talking about something specific or something related to that subject which is being discussed. Okay, so you can use it just like that. What about number 3, guys, and number 4, which have to do with describing time periods?
You can say since.
But let me see. Okay, you can say that. I don't know if it's here. 2000, because I don't see if it's here, because it should have been. No, it's not here. But in this case, and with 2011, as you see, we have in the 10 years to 2011. Let me see something. In the decade, I don't see it here. The point here is this one, is the one with 2011. It is in the 10 years to 2011. But of course, those expressions you are mentioning are expressions that we can also use. That's obvious. So those are also expressions we can use in this context with no problem. But in this case, it is in the 10 years to 2011. And here, let me see. Okay, now it has got 10 in between. I know it's a little bit tricky. So that one is in the next 10 years, this one. I'm gonna help you with that. In the next 10 years, that's exactly how it goes here, okay? So that's basically what we have. And the last one, which is about connecting information. What example did you find, guys, which is related to connecting information? Did you find any example that perhaps might be related with connecting information?
By contrast?
There we go. There you go. By contrast would be somehow one of the best options. Okay, guys, by contrast. So guys, now, as I said, we're gonna save here. We're gonna leave this one here. So before we continue, guys, I'd like to go a little bit over the structure of the sentences themselves and try to understand a little bit better what we actually mean by a sentence. I don't want to take like pretty much forever with this topic. So I'll try to be I'll try to cover it a little bit faster than what I normally do with this topic. Okay, guys. So some of you may remember this question, but if I ask you about this, guys, and that has to do, I mean, the let's say the problem with this question has to do with the way we call this in Spanish, and that would be, what's the difference between a sentence and a phrase? What would be the difference, guys? Because we've got those two expressions in Spanish we have one word basically. I mean, no, we actually have two words, but they are very confusing sometimes because we studied that when we were in elementary school. So what would be the difference between a sentence and phrase? What would you say, guys, if there's any?
Teacher, maybe that a sentence have to has a I don't know. For example, a subject, verb, the I don't know how to say it, the structure of
Structure,
and a phrase is not necessary to have a structure.
That's a point. That's a very interesting point. Thank you very much for sharing that. So let's have a look at that, guys, in a moment. So I don't know how to start exactly because I don't want to overwhelm you, but I do believe this is very important to do. So let's put it like this, guys. So let me share my screen right now. A phrase is shortened than a sentence. Well, it says. It is, believe me, it is, but that's not the only difference, but that is true. So let me just share my screen with you guys. So as I said, this is the topic that we are going to be introducing to describe this. It's something we call language conventions. So whenever we want to understand what's the difference, like questions like this, what's the difference between a phrase and a sentence, what would be the structure of a sentence, what kinds of sentences are there, What is a phrase? What kinds of phrases are there? What is a clause? What is a fragment? When we've got those sorts of questions, we are talking about, at the end of the day, about what we call language conventions. And that has to do with, let's say, rules that we have in the languages to describe these different things. So to understand that, guys, I want to share with you, I'm going to share with you this short video, which is about that, about grammar and what conventions really are. So I'm going to project the video right here. Let me see. Let me see if there is any other way we can do that, which is a little bit more efficient. No. Give me a second, guys. I want to try something. I want to try something just to share videos, perhaps in a slightly better way. Give me a second, guys. Just to see if we can do it in a little bit of a better way, instead of just projecting from YouTube, which sometimes doesn't look that good. So I'm going to try to share this video with you in a different way, just to explore a new function that Zoom has, which is sharing videos directly. Let me see. So I've got it here. Share. Let me see what happens if I choose this option. Okay, guys, so I will play just a couple of seconds, and you will let me know if you can see the video very well. So guys, my first question is, can you see the whole video in your screens, or is just like my screen and a little part of the video?
The whole video.
Okay, great. So can you hear the audio?
Hi, everyone. My name is David, and
Yes, teacher.
Yes, teacher.
Excellent, that looks good. So let's play it again. It's just 2 minutes 45, guys. So I really want to focus on that, and then we're gonna comment on this.
hi, everyone. My name is David, and I'm here to introduce you to grammar on Khan Academy. Well,
I'm sorry, guys. Is the video moving? I'm sorry for the question.
No, teacher.
It just says grammar, and that's it, right?
Yes.
There we go. Now I will have to share again. No, I'm sorry. The thing is that there is a problem with this, but I've got alternatives. Do not worry about that. Give me a second, guys. I'm just trying to. Okay, let me share it again. Sorry about this. This is what happens when you want to try new functions instead of just do it the easy way, but whatever. 1 second, guys.
hi, everyone. My name is David, and I'm here to introduce you to grammar on Khan Academy. Welcome. I'm so glad you could join me. So let's start by asking the question, what is grammar? What is this thing? Why is it worthwhile to study it? Why would you want to put up with listening to me? Well, first of all, grammar is a set of conventions and rules that govern language. So what's the difference between a convention and a rule? Well, a rule is kind of the bare minimum of what it takes to make your language understandable by other people, right? So in order to make a car work, for example, in order to make it move forward as intended, the wheels have to go on the bottom instead of on the roof. That's a rule. The idea that all cars should be painted teal, for example, is a convention. Now, is that true that all cars should be teal? No, not necessarily, but that leads me to my second point, that grammar is context dependent. The kind of grammar that you use throughout your day changes. It depends on who you're talking to, what you're trying to say, and how you're trying to say it. And so we use multiple kinds of grammar throughout our days and throughout our lives. Another thing you need to know is that you already know so much grammar just from living and existing in the world and talking to other people. You know how to put a sentence together. If you can understand me, then you know so much about grammar. You know more than I can teach you. What these videos are for is to give names to the things you already know, to give you a greater command of them. And I want to say too that these videos are only about a very specific kind of grammar. It's called Standard American English. But I want you to know that there are many Englishes. And you know what? They are all great. They are all wonderful and vibrant and important and special. And what I do not want for you to take away from these videos is that I'm trying to teach you what is right and what is wrong. If the kind of English you speak doesn't sound like the kind of English I speak, that is okay. You know, you are great. What I want to do is give you the tools to harness language, to harness English, and use it any way you want. I mean, I'm saying I don't care what color your car is. It could be pink, it could be green, it could be purple, it could be paisley, you know? I'm just trying to make sure your wheels are on straight. You are a grammarian. You have made a study of grammar throughout your entire speaking and reading life. And I firmly believe that you can learn anything. Welcome to Grammar on Khan Academy. David out.
Okay, guys, there you go. So, so as you can see here, basically what this guy is talking about is two things in general terms. He's talking about conventions and rules, right? So he says that those are two essential elements whenever we are, you know, talking about languages in general terms. So when we talk about languages, we've got at least those two elements, the rules and the conventions. And somehow, when we talk about the rules, we are talking about very specifically about grammar, right? So as he says, if you understood what he was saying, that means that you know already a lot of grammar, right? Because you know how the structure of the language works. So you know how the verbs are placed, how they are conjugated according to different tenses. So it's all about the grammar that you already know. But in this case, guys, and specifically as we talk about writing, and even more when we talk about writing for effectiveness, as we said for the project, in the case of the project, that we are all doing all of this in order to communicate more effectively and get understood better, let's say. When we do that, conventions play a very important role. So as he said, talking about rules, aka grammar, we know that cars have the wheels in their bottom, right? You know how the wheels must be rounded. They can be squared. Those are rules, right? But a convention we've got here in Colombia is that those cars that work as taxis, they must be either a yellow or sometimes white. That's a convention. But they could have been black, and actually they were in the 80s. That's what I know. We had like black and yellow taxis. You see, that was a convention, but they hadn't to be that way. But if you want to take a car for that service, which is not yellow, that would be weird, right? That would be different. You know, like you are not following a convention stated by you know, society. And let's not talk about Uber and so on. We are talking just about this example. We also know that like a car that offers a service for firefighting is always red. But once again, that is a convention. We decided to have these cars in that color, but they could have been in a different color. And it happens with any sort of car which offers a public service, let's say. So that means that this topic that we're going to be studying is not something you need to communicate, because otherwise people will not understand you, but this is something we need in order to communicate more effectively, and in order to adjust our language to a specific contexts, and in this case, very specifically, the case of writing. So guys, before I share my screen and I start like sort of sharing this information with you, I'd like to know if you guys have any question about this video that we just watched. Is there any question, guys, by any chance?
No, teacher, but may I ask for the link to see it later.
There you
please?
go. This is exactly what I was going to do. Yeah, I was copying it. It's right here. So there are some really cool videos from Khan Academy about this topic specifically. So yeah, I really like it. It's very simple, very straightforward. So that's pretty much how it works. So the link is right there in the chat box. So guys, let's try to do this. Let me just share my screen. Give me a second, please. June. So here we are. There are some things, let me see, because there are some things that we are going to skip, that we are not going to go in detail in this moment. So we said that all this thing about language conventions has to do with roles versus conventions. So this is not about rules, guys. This is not about, you know, using the grammar correctly. So if it's present, how to conjugate in present. We are not talking about that. Once again, that's why this example this guy gave us on the car is so important, because we're not focusing on grammar, but on conventions, on the way we paint our car, let's say, depending on the purpose that we've got with any sort of, not just text, but with any sort of kind of communication, let's say. So regarding language conventions, there are many conventions, but essentially we've got 4, and we're gonna focus on these 4 different conventions. I know, guys, that some of you have already studied this before, but I believe it's really important for us to really understand this and go and see it from a different perspective now. So these are 4 key conventions. And when we see this, especially these 3 words which are in black, we quite often have a hard time trying to define each one of them. What is a clause? What is a phrase? What is a sentence? It's kind of hard sometimes to define this. So let's start. Let's start, like, guys, I like you guys to see this from an inductive perspective. So we're gonna go from a specific to general. So we're gonna try to build this little by little. Okay, so that means that we're gonna actually go to phrases. We're gonna start with phrases. Okay, so we're gonna go from little to big, let's say. So phrases, guys, are parts of sentences. So well, Valeria said that phrases are shorter. Absolutely, yes, because phrases are not sentences. And that means that phrases are little the parts of the sentences, but they are not sentences themselves. They are groups of related words. And I believe this is the best way to define it, guys. They are groups of related words. Okay, they are groups of words. They are not sentences. A phrase is a group of words. And those groups can be groups of subjects or groups of verbs, but never both, you see? So for instance, in this first sentence, in this first phrase, my favorite food, what would be the verb in this first one, guys? My favorite food. What would be the verb in the first phrase, guys? What is the verb here, guys?
There's no verb.
There's no verb, right? And that's what makes it a phrase, because it is a group of related words. So we've got 3 different words, but there is no verb. There are just words that refer to a subject. So it's your favorite food. You see, same thing happens with this one. We've got a possessive, we've got an adjective and a noun, but they all together refer to a noun. You see, in this case, they refer to a subject. They don't refer to a verb. You see, so this is an example of a phrase. You see, we said actually last week that this is what we normally call syntagma. That's the way we call it in Spanish, which is a very crazy word. So phrase is not frase. That's one big difference here. So phrases are not phrases. They are completely different. They are what we call syntagmas. Nevertheless, for some reason, and I'm still trying to understand this a little bit better, there are some cases, and actually in this book we are using, they also use the word phrase to refer to short sentences, which is not actually the best way to put it. And once again, that has to do with conventions. So if you see that, say, somebody says, let's analyze the following phrase, and they show you a sentence, is not necessarily a mistake, because once again, remember, this is something that has to do with conventions. But phrases are actually this, okay? If we want to be clear, specific, phrases are this, groups of related words. So we have noun phrases, guys, like my favorite food, your beautiful eyes, a cool song, an amazing movie. You see, they are groups of words that refer only to nouns. You see, they don't refer to verbs because they have no verbs. So when we are writing any text, we write phrases all the time, right? Which are these groups of related words. And we also have verb phrases, which in the best example are those in which we are conjugating verbs and using forms in which we require to use as you can see in this case, have or where or are, followed by ing forms or forms in past. So those are also verb phrases. So was used, have worked, were discovered, are coming, is going, will understand, have been understood. You see, all these groups of words refer to verb phrases. Okay, so this is somehow, I mean, the smallest part we could somehow have in a text would be a word, and I would say in quotation marks that because actually there are smaller parts which are the roots of the words, but that's like a little bit too much. Let's say that the smallest part in a text normally would be a word. Then so we have words, that's the smallest piece of a text, right? One single word. You could have said it could be a letter, it could be a grapheme, I know, but let's take it easy and not complicate ourselves with this. We would say the smallest part would be a word. Then from a word, we would continue with a phrase, which is groups of words which are related. You see, that would be the next, part in a text. So those are phrases, okay? Groups of related words. So what is the smallest thing we can have in a text normally? Well, a word actually, and then what's next? Well, would be a phrase if we have a group of related words. This is not like something that everyone would agree on, because as I said, actually the smallest piece in a text could be a grapheme, a letter. I know, but we are not gonna get so complicated about that. Okay, so those are phrases. Then guys, the next thing I would like you guys to have a look at are clauses, okay? So clauses are bigger than phrases, of course. But what is the point with clauses? As you know that in the case of phrases, we know that a phrase is a phrase because it's a group of related words, words which are related, words that could be either noun phrases or verb phrases. So they become a phrase when they get together and they are a group which is related, right? But in the case of clauses, what makes a clause is that, first of all, it has to have a subject, right? And it has to have a complete verb. What do we mean a complete verb? Well, a tense. In other words, a conjugated verb, right? That's what makes it a complete verb or tense. Okay, guys, this is very important. When we say a tense or a complete verb, we are talking about a verb which is being conjugated, a verb which is being used, a verb which is not in infinitive. Talking about the subject, guys, this is something also you have to be very careful with, because sometimes people believe that subject is the person or the thing that does the action. That is not true, okay? Because it doesn't mean that every single clause in this case has has an element or has a person who's doing an action. That's not how it works. The subject essentially is what you are talking about, in other words, almost like the topic. It's more similar to topic. So for example, in this first clause, education is the subject, right? What is the complete verb in this clause, guys? What would be the complete verb in the first one? What do you think, guys? Education is the key to prosperity. What would be the complete verb in that clause?
Is.
There you go, Karen. Thank you very much. So is the complete verb. This case is the verb to be, but in this case is complete because it's conjugated. So that's it, guys. That's what makes a clause a clause. Colombia is in the north of South America. The same thing, you see? So if we've got these two elements, we are talking about a clause. You see, a clause is a clause when it has got these two different elements. It could have been something way more simpler, like way simpler, like education is important. That would be a clause because it has these two key elements. You see, when you have these two key elements, we have a clause. So as you can see that in the case of phrases, they are a group of related words. They are a group of words that refer to a verb or a group of verbs or words that refer to a noun. But in this case, we have two. So when it's not a group of related words, but when we have both a subject, right, and also a verb, it becomes a clause, you see? So if you say, I am Colombian, that is a clause, you see, because it has an I, which is the subject, and am, which is the complete verb. You see, so that is a clause as long as you have those two elements. But the thing is that it gets a little bit more confusing because there are two kinds of clauses at least. There are at least two kinds of clauses, you see? So we have independent clauses and we have also other kind of clause, but just give me a second. I want to double check the spelling of this word because I see it like that there and I'm not pretty sure. Because I believe it's written with A at the end. There you go, yes. So give me a second, we need to correct this. It is written like this, independent clause. So we have independent clauses. So when we say education is the key to prosperity, or Colombia is in the north of South America, we understand, right? So Colombia is in the north of South America. Okay, yes. So you are saying something which is true, even if it's a lie, it doesn't mean it has to be true. But when you read the clause and you say, okay, I understand the message, it means that the clause is independent. It is independent because that clause that you see there doesn't need more information to be understood. Of course, you can give reason stuff, but it is okay just like this because you don't feel like you need something else to understand it. But on the other hand, there's dependent clauses. On the other hand, we have dependent clauses, you see, which are these clauses in which you require other information because they do not have context. So for instance, if you say, because I like pizza, so it's a clause because it has the subject and the verb, but we need context. We know that this is part of something bigger, you see, because I like pizza or because my friends are stupid. So we are missing something there. You see, so in that case, we know that this is a dependent clause. This is very important, guys, because sometimes this is the kind of mistake that we have in texts when we have this kinds of, fragments which are isolated and we need to correct. But I believe it's very clear what's the difference between independent and dependent clauses, right? Right, guys?
Yes, you
Okay, thank you. So once again, we have phrases, which are a group of words, which are related, very simple. And then we have clauses, which are clauses because they have two key elements, the subject and the complete verb, right? Subject and the complete verb. That's why they are clauses. But there is something bigger. And there is this, word that we quite often use to refer to this. And this is a word that we are familiar with, which is sentences. So we are going to finally understand exactly what a sentence is. So we know that in the case of phrases, we say that phrases are phrases because they are a group of related words. Clauses are clauses because they have a subject and a complete verb. Well, sentences also have two key criteria. First, they always, with no exception, need to have full meaning. What is full meaning? It means the second thing, they are not dependent. Okay, that's what a sentence is. A sentence is a fragment. It's not a fragment, I'm sorry. A sentence is a chain of words which has full meaning, right? It's a composition that has full meaning. It means that it's not just because it has a subject or it has all the criteria that we see it before. So it has groups of related words, it has a subject, it has a complete verb, but also it has full meaning. So the fact that it has full meaning means that we don't need complementary information, you see? So that means that independent clauses can also be sentences. You see, that's what makes it a little bit more complex. An independent clause is also a sentence, which is almost a spoiler of the kinds of sentences we have. So we have a statement here which is 100% sure, and we admit no doubt about that, and is Deportes Tolima is the best team of Colombia. You see, for example, that would be an example of a sentence, right? But this is the most important moment, guys, in all this explanation, understanding what an actual sentence is. So the sentence includes all the things we said about phrases and clauses. So those criteria are also included here, okay? But apart from that, they have to have full meaning and they can never be dependent, you see? So that's what happens with sentences. But what happens with sentences, guys, is that sentences can be also, give me a second, guys. Let me just share this again. Sentences, give me a second. Sentences can also be, they could be built, used several clauses. And this is a very important word. Let me just put it on here in the presentation better. So I will put an example really quick here because I just see that I don't have it. Give me a second, guys, as I put this thing here. If you've got questions, you can also just let me know. I just found an explanation that I might want to share with you, but let me see. Let me see. I'm just trying to put this so you understand a little bit better what this is. Because as we know that there are different kinds of clauses, we also have different kinds of sentences, and I just want to introduce this a little bit better here. Let me put it over here so you can see it also. In context, guys, I'm sorry for this delay, but I just wanted to share that with you as well. Okay, guys, so let me see. Finally got it here. So we said, let me just share my screen again. So we said that sentences have full meaning and they are non-dependent. But the thing is that we also have simple verb and compound sentences. We have also another kind of sentence which is called complex. We will not see that yet. But the most important thing to understand what a sentence is to understand the difference between a simple and a compound sentence. What's an example of a simple sentence? A clause. A clause is an example of a simple sentence. So this is an example of a simple sentence, guys, because it has a subject, it has a complete verb, and it has full meaning. You see? So every time we write a sentence like that, that would be a simple sentence. A sentence that has a subject, a complete verb, and it has full meaning. You see? So independent clauses are very good examples of simple sentences. You see? But the thing here changes when we see the second kind of sentences, which are the compound sentences, because these sentences are sentences that are made up two independent clauses. So when we can connect clauses or simple sentences, and we make a compound sentence. So in other words, a compound sentence, it's a composition of two simple sentences which are coordinated. You see? So once again, an example of a simple sentence could be education. We said once, education is the key to prosperity, right? That is an example of a simple sentence. But we can add more information and we could say education is the key to prosperity because it offers better opportunities to people. You see? So let's do it over here in a Word file so we can see it a little bit better and you guys understand somehow better what I'm trying to put up right here. So let me share my screen again. Sorry guys that I'm just sharing so many different things at the same time. So we said this, guys. We said education is the key to prosperity, right? And this is already a this is a sentence, right? This is a simple sentence. Why? Subject, complete verb. But this is a simple sentence, right? Because it's only one clause. But a compound sentence has at least, has two different simple sentences. So education is the key to prosperity because what happened? Why is it like this? Give me a second. Because it gives opportunities to people. I don't know why it is looking like this. It looks a little bit confusing. Sorry, guys. You see, so we've got this element which coordinates these two clauses, but clause number one would be this, right? That would be the clause number one, you see? And then we have clause number two, which is this one in blue. Let's use this blue color. That is the clause 2. You see, guys? So that's essentially how it works. And all of this together, it's a complex sentence. This is a complex sentence altogether. You see? Now I've got a question, guys. Remember that sentences can be dependent or independent, right? Is that true, guys? Sentences can be dependent or independent, right?
No, because the sentence cannot be dependent.
There you go. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely false. Thank you very much, Anjay. Sentences cannot be dependent, like never. They are always independent, right? But the ones that can be dependent or independent are what are those that can be dependent or independent? It's not clauses.
Clauses.
There you go, Karen. It's clauses, right? It's clauses. It's not sentences, it's clauses. So this one, education is the key to prosperity. We know that this is the first clause. Is this dependent or independent? This one.
Independent.
Independent.
That's independent, because if we use it alone, that makes sense to us. Education is a key to prosperity. Okay, yeah. But if we say, and what about the second clause? It gives better opportunities to people. Is that dependent or independent?
Dependent.
And why is it dependent?
Because we don't know what give us better opportunities.
There you go. If you don't have the information which is right before that, it makes no sense to you. It gives better opportunities to people. Anything that can give better opportunities to people if we've got no context, you see? So guys, it might sound a little bit obvious for some. It might sound a little bit senseless for others. But to be honest, guys, this is the key for you to write decent texts. You see, this is the most common problem I see when people are writing texts. So sometimes you've got a very good vocabulary, your ideas are really catchy and everything. But if we don't understand this division and this, basic definition of what a sentence is, we start to have really, really complex problems when writing. I said, very first thing you gotta keep in mind, guys, is that we cannot write very long sentences in English. This is the key structure, guys. Every time you want to write a sentence, like, okay, I'm gonna write a paragraph, right? So my sentences have to have full meaning, right? And they have to have a subject, they have to have a complete verb, they have connected words. Yes, but apart from that, you know that there is a limit. So when do we use the period? Well, you might use the period after every single compound sentence or complex sentences in some cases, but we cannot just write and write and write because we don't have such structure. You see, so this is very important for us to understand when to stop and use a period, for example, but also to coordinate the information that we provide in our sentences a little bit better. Okay, guys, so I'd like to know if you have any question before we close this part. Tomorrow we're gonna finish this explanation, but I'd like to know if you have any question about this specifically.
No, teacher.
No, teacher.
Great, guys. So great. So guys, we've got one very simple homework for tomorrow. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do, listen up because I really want you to do this. I would like you to Google any kind of text. You can choose any kind of text, just one paragraph. A paragraph of maximum 5 lines, let's put it like that. So it must be a paragraph like the ones that we had in the text that we just checked. Diana is asking me if the presentation is on Moodle. It will be, so I will upload it there. Thank you for asking. So you will just find one paragraph, any kind of text, ideally a text that you can understand very well. So let's try to avoid text like very technical text, which might be very complex. So just look for a text that you understand, like when you read it, you understand it. And I'd like you to identify all these different things that we said. So please identify examples of phrases, identify examples of independent clauses, dependent clauses, simple sentences, and complex sentences. Okay, so I will simply complex not, but compound sentences. So I would like you just to have that text and just use colors to underline that. So you see those examples, and we're gonna have a look at them tomorrow. Okay, that's gonna be it. Tomorrow we're gonna start by talking about complex sentences, which is the next step regarding sentences. And if we understand this well, I promise, I swear on my life that this is going to be a really obvious booster in terms of your writing skills. You will see how your paragraphs will look way more organized. So this is super, super important, guys. Okay, so it is as simple as that. Just look for a paragraph, a text that you like, that you understand very well, and just do what I just did here. Like you play with colors just to highlight parts and stuff. And tomorrow in the breakout rooms, we're gonna be checking that, and we also will be, solving doubts regarding this. Okay, guys. So as I said, I will upload this presentation to the Moodle for you as well. But remember that this recording will be in this YouTube channel that I've shared with you before. Apart from that, guys, I know it's Monday, but it was quite sunny, quite a beautiful day. So you should have participated way more. I mean, we've got 43 people here, right, at the end of the day. So how come it's just 4 or 5 people, answering questions and so on and so forth? Okay, guys, so I'm gonna stop the recording in this moment. We're gonna call the attendance, and then we are good to go.